The rain had been falling for 3 days without stopping. Seo Yeon-ji stood at the window of her ninth-floor apartment in Mapogu, watching the Han River turn the color of old pewter. She was 31 years old, and she had not cried in 4 years. Not at her mother's funeral. Not when Junho left. Not even the night she sat alone in the hospital corridor after the miscarriage no one else knew about, the pregnancy she had never told him about because she had already sensed by then that he was already gone. She pressed her palm flat against the cold glass. Outside, the city moved the way it always did, indifferent, relentless, beautiful in its indifference. Seoul did not stop for grief. That was something she had always loved about it and, lately, something she could no longer stand. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't look at it. The apartment was immaculate. Not the immaculate of a person who loved order, but the immaculate of a person who controlled everything she could because she had learned early that the things you could not control would eventually destroy you. The bookshelves were arranged by color. The throw pillows were parallel. The single orchid on the dining table had been watered that morning at exactly 7:15, the same time every morning, because routines were the scaffolding that held the shape of a life that had lost its reason. She had a good job, senior editor at a mid-size publishing house in Hongdae. She had friends who thought she was fine. She had a therapist she lied to every Thursday. She had a life that, from the outside, looked like recovery. She was not recovered. She was performing recovery, and she had become so skilled at the performance that sometimes she confused the two herself. The phone buzzed again. This time she looked. Unknown number. Mapo District. She almost didn't answer. Later, she would think about that, how close she came to letting it ring out. How different everything would have been. She picked up. Yeon-ji SSI. The voice was a man's. Quiet. Careful. This is Han Jae-won. I don't know if you remember me. We were in the same graduate seminar. 12 years ago. Professor Oh's class. She remembered him immediately. That was the first strange thing. I remember, she said. There was a pause. Outside, the rain continued to fall. I'm sorry to call like this, he said. I got your number from Minesio. I hope that's okay. Another pause. I found something. Something that belongs to you. I think. I'm not sure how to explain it over the phone. She should have said send it by mail. She should have said I'm very busy right now. She should have said any of the 10 polite Korean deferrals she was fluent in deploying. Where are you? She said instead. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table by the window with a cup of barley tea cooling in front of him and a manila envelope on the table beside it. She recognized him the way you recognize a word in a language you studied once and let lapse, the shape of the meaning still there, even if the fluency was gone. Han Jae-won was 34. He had the kind of face that did not announce itself, not striking in any cinematic way, but the kind of face that became more interesting the longer you looked at it. There was something considered about the way he held himself, as if he was always slightly more aware of his body in space than most people were. His hands, she noticed, were very still. She sat down across from him. You look the same, he said. I don't, she said. He accepted this without argument. She found that she appreciated it. He slid the envelope across the table. She opened it. Inside was a photograph. Black and white, printed on the kind of thick matte paper that meant it had been developed properly, not printed on a home inkjet. It showed a young woman from behind, standing at the edge of what appeared to be a rooftop. Her hair was long and loose and lifted slightly by wind. Below her, out of focus, the unmistakable tiled rooftops and narrow alleys of Bukshan. She knew, with the specific certainty of the body rather than the mind, that the woman in the photograph was her. She was 22. She had no memory of the photograph being taken. Where did you get this? She asked. Her voice was perfectly level. I've been clearing out my father's house, Jae-won said. He passed away in February. He kept everything, boxes of things, photographs, letters. I found it in a box of negatives from the late 2000s. There were other photographs in the roll, street scenes, markets. And then this one. I don't know why he had it. I don't know if he knew you. I thought," he paused. "I thought you should have it. I thought you'd want to know." Yeon-ji set the photograph down very carefully on the table. She looked at it for a long moment. "Did you develop the others?" she asked. "Yes. Did any of them show a face? Of whoever was photographing her?" The pause before he answered was the first moment she understood that this was not going to be simple. "One of them," he said. "Yes." She brought the photograph home. She did not eat dinner. She set the photograph on her kitchen counter and looked at it while the city outside moved through its evening, the muffled bass of a passing car, the chime of a delivery app, the rain that still had not stopped. The woman in the photograph was herself. She was certain of this the way you are certain of your own handwriting. The slope of the shoulders. The particular way the left hip angled outward when the weight shifted. She had been 22. She had lived in Buckshin for 8 months during her graduate internship, renting a half-basement room from a landlady who charged too much and asked too many questions. She had not been happy that year. It had been the year after her first serious relationship ended, a man named Do-hyun who she had loved in a specific, consuming way you love for the first time, before you understand that love is not enough and that wanting someone very badly is not the same as being good for each other. She had been grief-stricken that year in a way she hadn't allowed herself to name as grief. She had walked a lot. She had stood on a lot of rooftops. She had not known anyone was watching. She opened her laptop and searched for Han Jae-won's father, Han Jae-won. He had been a photographer. She found 3 articles, 2 small exhibition write-ups from the mid-2000s, 1 obituary from February of this year. The obituary described him as a quiet chronicler of Seoul's overlooked spaces and solitary figures. There was a small photograph of him, a lean man in his late 60s, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of face that had spent a long time looking at things. She read the phrase again. Solitary figures. She closed the laptop. She looked at the photograph. The woman standing at the edge of the rooftop, her hair lifted by wind, alone in a city of 10 million people. She thought, he saw me. He saw me when I didn't know I was visible. She thought, why does that feel like the most intimate thing that has happened to me in years? She sat with that thought for a long time. Outside, the rain continued. In the kitchen, the orchid on the table was perfectly still. She called him at 11:15 that night. She told herself she had waited a reasonable amount of time, that it was not too late to call, that this was a business matter. "The other photograph," she said, when he answered. "The one with the face. Can I see it?" There was a pause. She heard him moving, the sound of a chair, a window perhaps being opened. Rain on his end too. "I was wondering when you'd ask," he said. "You knew I would." "Yes. Why didn't you just bring it today?" Another pause. Longer this time. She understood, somehow, that he was not stalling, he was choosing his words with the same care she chose everything. "Because I wanted to give you a chance to decide whether you wanted to know," he said finally. "Some things, once you see them, you can't unsee them. I've been learning that. This year. With my father's things." He paused again. "Some of what I found in those boxes, I wish I hadn't seen it." The intimacy of that admission, from a near stranger, at 11 at night, landed somewhere unexpected in her chest. She was not accustomed to people offering their own vulnerability first. She had learned, over years, to read every act of openness as either strategic or naive. This felt like neither. "I want to know," she said. "Okay," he said. And then, quietly, "Are you doing okay tonight, Yeon-ji SSI? It's a lot to sit with alone. For years without crying. For years of perfect composure, of performed recovery, of the orchid watered at 7:15 every morning." "I'm fine," she said, the way she always said it, He let the silence sit for a moment. Then, okay. I'll see you Saturday. After she hung up, she sat in the dark for a long time. The city hummed outside. The rain had finally begun to ease. She thought about what it meant that a near stranger had asked "Are you okay?" in a way that made the question feel real, and that the truest answer she had was "I don't know, and I haven't known for a long time, and I've been so good at pretending otherwise that I've almost convinced myself." She did not cry. But something, some small, calcified thing, shifted, just slightly, in the architecture of her carefully maintained quiet. His father's house was in Seoul, a narrow two-story structure tucked between a convenience store and a closed laundromat on a street that smelled of ginkgo and wet stone. It was the kind of house that Seoul was slowly erasing: wooden beam ceilings, floor heating that clicked and murmured at night, a small enclosed garden where a persimmon tree grew in a pot too small for it, its roots pressed against the terracotta as if trying to escape. Yeon-ji arrived at 10. Jae-won opened the door and she saw, immediately, the particular exhaustion of a person who has been living inside someone else's life for months, the grief that came not just from loss but from the archaeology of it, from opening drawers and finding the evidence of a person's interior world long after they were gone to explain themselves. The house was full of boxes. Some were labeled in neat black marker. Others were open, their contents visible: rolls of film in black canisters, stacks of developed prints in paper envelopes, notebooks with cracked spines. "Coffee?" he asked. "Please," she said. She stood in the front room while he made it, looking at the walls. There were framed photographs everywhere, not his father's work, she would realize later, but photographs of his father. A young man with a camera around his neck standing in front of what she recognized as the old Junho district. A middle-aged man laughing at a table full of people. An older man, alone in a garden, looking at something outside the frame with an expression she could not name, not quite melancholy, not quite peace. Something between. She thought about what it meant to leave behind a house full of images. What a specific kind of legacy that was. Not words, not objects, looking. He had spent his life looking at the world and preserving what he saw, and now he was gone and his son was left to sort through all of it, to decide what to keep and what to let go. She understood, suddenly and without warning, why Jae-won had sounded the way he sounded on the phone. He came back with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. Their fingers didn't touch. She noticed that she noticed this. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for calling," she said. And then, because honesty felt suddenly less dangerous than it usually did, "I've been thinking about it every day since Thursday." He looked at her. Not with surprise, exactly. With recognition. "So have I," he said. He took her upstairs to his father's study. The room was smaller than she expected: a desk, a filing cabinet, shelves of photography books, a single window overlooking the garden below. On the desk was a wooden box, the kind used for archival prints. He opened it without ceremony and took out the photograph. She took it. She looked at it. It was the same rooftop. The same day, the quality of the light was identical, that particular pewter gray of a Seoul afternoon in late autumn. In this photograph, she was not the subject. She was visible at the edge of the frame, her back to the camera, small and dark against the pale sky. The photographer was visible in the foreground, reflected in a glass surface, a skylight or a ventilation panel, his image caught by accident or intention in the act of shooting. He was in his 50s. Wire-rimmed glasses. A lean face with a concentrated expression, the camera raised to his eye. Utterly absorbed in what he was looking at. She had never seen this man before in her life. Or had she? She looked for a long time. "There's something else," Jae-won said, quietly. He took a small notebook from the box and handed it to her. This was in the same box as the negatives. I believe he kept notes about his subjects. Observations. Not names. He respected privacy, he never named anyone in his personal work. But. She opened the notebook. His father's handwriting, small, precise, slightly slanted. She found the entry by date, late October, 2009. She read it. Buckshin rooftop. Late afternoon. Young woman, maybe 22. She doesn't know I'm here. She's been up here 3 times this week. I've been working in the neighborhood. She stands in the same place every time. Looks south, toward the river. She is not looking at anything specific. She is the most alone person I have ever photographed, and I have photographed a great many alone people. There is something in the way she holds herself, like she is waiting to feel something again. I hope she does. Yeon-ji read it twice. Then she closed the notebook very carefully and set it on the desk. She did not speak for a long time. He saw you, Jae-won said softly. He saw something in you that he needed to. He was right, she said. Her voice was very steady. I wasn't feeling anything that year. I had stopped. I didn't know how to start again. The room was very quiet. The persimmon tree in the garden below moved slightly in a wind she couldn't feel from up here. Do you know how to start again now? Jae-won asked. She looked at him. For the first time since Thursday she let her face be fully readable. I'm not sure, she said honestly. But I think I want to try. They ate at a pojangmaka 2 streets over, tteokbokki and fish cake skewers under a red tarp, the lunch crowd around them indifferent and ordinary and reassuring in their ordinariness. Yeon-ji ate more than she usually did. She noticed this and said nothing about it. They talked about his father. She learned that Han Jae-won had been a secondary school photography teacher for 20 years before retiring. That he had been widowed when Jae-won was 12, a car accident, instantaneous, no long illness to prepare for. That he and Jae-won had been close in the way that fathers and sons who lose the third person in the equation sometimes become close, out of necessity first, and then out of genuine understanding. That in the last years, before the illness, they had spent Saturday mornings together, walking the city, Jae-won carrying his father's second camera. He taught me to look, Jae-won said. He used to say, most people move through the world so fast that they only register the things that force themselves to be noticed. He wanted me to learn to notice the things that were trying not to be. Yeon-ji thought about that. She thought about herself at 22, standing on a rooftop trying not to be. What do you do now? She asked. Your work. I'm a social worker, he said. Family services. A pause. I know. It surprises people. It doesn't surprise me, she said. And it didn't. A man taught to notice the things that were trying not to be. Of course. He looked at her with something that might have been gratitude, or might have been the expression of a person who had been correctly understood and was not yet used to it. What he didn't say, she would understand this later, was that he had been the one who arranged his father's last year of care. That he had sat in waiting rooms and spoken to doctors and managed the paperwork of a life winding down while also managing his own. That he had been carrying this loss for much longer than February, he had been carrying the anticipation of it for 3 years, which was in some ways heavier. He didn't say any of this over tteokbokki. But it was present in the way he ate, in the careful way he spoke about his father in the past tense as if he was still getting used to the tense, the slight delay before each was, as if his mouth still wanted to say is. She noticed. She let him not say it. She asked, before she left, if she could borrow the box. Not keep it. Borrow. She was careful about the word. The photographs, she said. The negatives. The notebook. I want to, I don't know. I want to spend time with them. I want to understand what he saw. She paused. I feel like I owe it to him. Even if he can't know. Jae-won looked at her for a moment. Then he said, can I ask you something first? Yes. Why do you live the way you do? The apartment, I could see it in your face when you described it. Everything in its place. Like you've built a wall out of routine. He said this without judgment. Gently, the way a social worker might. You don't have to answer. She thought about deflecting. She thought about one of her 10 polite Korean deferrals. She thought about how she had been lying to her therapist every Thursday for 2 years, and how the lies had begun to feel more exhausting than the truth would have. I had a loss, she said. A few years ago. That no one else knew about. And I decided, after, that the safest thing was to need very little. To control everything I could. To make the world as predictable as possible. She looked at her hands. It worked. I'm very stable. I feel almost nothing. She looked up at him. I don't know anymore if that's surviving or just a very long delay. He was quiet for a long moment. My father would have photographed you, he said. He photographed people who were in between. He said that was when people were most real, when they were between one thing and the next, not performing arrival or departure. Just suspended. Another pause. He would have thought you were very interesting. She picked up the wooden box from the desk. It was heavier than it looked. I'll bring it back Saturday, she said. No rush, he said. She walked down the narrow stairs of his father's house and out into the grey Seoul afternoon, carrying a dead man's archive of her own forgotten grief, and she thought, something has shifted. Something I thought was permanent has moved. She did not know yet whether to be afraid of that or not. She spent 7 evenings with the box. She approached the photographs the way she approached manuscripts at work, methodically, cataloging before interpreting, creating order before allowing feeling. She made a spreadsheet. She dated each print, cross-referenced the notebooks, mapped the progression of his father's years of walking the city. Han Jae-won had photographed Seoul across 40 years. She found herself inside a city she thought she knew, made strange and new by his attention. Markets in Junho in the 90s, faces she would never know. The old Seoul Sangha before its renovation, a labyrinth of second-hand electronics and men who lived in the margins of the economy. Children playing in alleys in Nakwandong on Sunday afternoons. Elderly women sitting outside their front doors in Ikseondong, their faces carrying the specific, magnificent expression of people who had lived through the 20th century in Korea and were still here to be in the sun. And scattered throughout, solitary figures. Young people on rooftops. A man in his 50s crying on a park bench in Tapgal Park with the absolute unself-consciousness of someone who believed he was invisible. A teenage girl reading on the steps of a closed shop in the rain, so absorbed she was beyond caring about the wet. A woman in her 30s dancing Al-1-1 in her apartment, visible through a lit window from the street below. All of them unseen. All of them, because of the eye that found them, now permanently visible. On the 5th night she called her therapist. Not on Thursday. On a Tuesday, at 9 p.m., which she had never done. I need to tell you something true, she said. There was a pause. Okay, her therapist said. I'm listening. She told her about the miscarriage. The one from 4 years ago. The one she had carried alone and sealed off and built the whole architecture of her controlled, protected life around, as if enough routine could eventually metabolize a grief that had never been properly felt. It took 40 minutes. She cried for the last 15. She did not call Jae-won. But she thought about calling him. The fact that she wanted to call someone, that she had a specific someone she wanted to call, felt like a form of evidence. About herself. About the damage having limits. About the wall being, perhaps, not as permanent as she had built it to be. She returned to the notebook every night. Not to all of it. To one entry. The one from Bukshan, late October 2009. She read it the way you read a message from someone who understood you, before you knew you needed to be understood. She is the most alone person I have ever photographed. She thought about what it meant to be someone's subject without knowing it. There was a word for this, she supposed, violation was the easy word. But it wasn't violation she felt when she read it. What she felt was harder to name. She felt found. She felt located. She had been lost in herself at 22 and a stranger had looked at her and seen not just her aloneness but something in it, something worth keeping. I hope she does. 4 words. I hope she does. Feel something again. She did not know, sitting in her apartment at 31, whether the answer was yes. She thought the truer answer was not yet, but for the first time in years, not yet felt different from no. Not yet felt like something with a future attached to it. She took out a piece of paper and wrote, by hand, she rarely wrote by hand, a letter to Han Jae-won. She didn't know why. He was dead. He would never read it. She wrote, I don't know if you photographed me because you saw something worth seeing or because I happened to be there. I think it might have mattered once. I don't think it matters anymore. You saw me. That was enough. I think I spent 12 years not being seen on purpose, because I was afraid of what someone might find. I think I'm less afraid now. I don't know if I have you to thank for that, or your son, or your city, or just the particular accident of this week. But thank you anyway. For looking. For the 4 words. She folded the letter and put it in the wooden box with the photographs and the notebook. Then she opened her phone and wrote to Jae-won, Saturday is too long. Are you free Thursday? He replied in 4 minutes, yes. She chose the location. She brought him to Nakwandong, the old instrument market, narrow streets dense with guitar shops and sheet music and the faint sound of someone playing, always playing, behind some window or half-open door. It was the neighborhood where she had done her graduate research, 12 years ago. She had never brought anyone here. Not Junho. Not her friends. It was a private geography, the city she had walked alone during the worst year, the city that had held her when she had not known she needed holding. Jae-won was quiet in the way of someone who understood that she was giving him something by bringing him here. They walked slowly. She showed him the building where she had worked her internship. The Pojangmaka, different owners now, where she had eaten alone every Friday night because she had told herself she preferred it. The second-hand bookshop run by an elderly man who had let her sit and read for hours without buying anything, who had once pressed a worn copy of Kim Hysun's poetry into her hands and said, take it, you look like you need it. She saved my life a little bit, she said. That poet. I know that sounds dramatic. It doesn't, he said. Words do that sometimes. Find you when nothing else can. He nodded. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, my father used to say photographs do the same thing. That they can reach through time and touch someone in a way nothing else can. He believed that's what art was for, not beauty. Touch. She stopped walking. They were standing in front of the bookshop. The elderly owner was gone, the shop now sold tourist goods. She stood and looked at it for a moment. Then she turned to Jae-won and said, I wrote your father a letter. He looked at her. I put it in the box, she said. I know he can't read it. I needed to write it anyway. He did not say that's sweet or how lovely. He said, thank you. Quietly, with the weight of someone who meant exactly those 2 words. I think he would have wanted to know. She looked at him standing in the narrow Nakwandong street, with the faint sound of someone playing guitar behind a closed door and the smell of old wood and the city moving all around them. She thought, I don't know you. And I think that is exactly why it's easier to be honest with you than with anyone else. They took the bus home, the long route, the one that crossed the river. She had suggested it without fully understanding why. He had agreed without asking. They sat side by side on the upper deck of the bus, the Han River below them in the evening light, wide and quiet, the same pewter gray it had been from her window the day he first called. It looked different from here. Or she was different. It was difficult to say. He told her, on the bus, about the 3 years before his father died. Not everything, the way you don't tell everything on a bus, in one go, the first time you're fully honest with someone. But enough. The anticipatory grief of watching someone you love move slowly toward an ending you cannot stop. The particular loneliness of being the one who holds things together when things are falling apart, and the silence afterward, the silence after, when the thing you had been holding together finally ends, and you realize that you have been so focused on holding that you forgot to simply be there, present, in the last of it. I keep thinking I missed him, Jae-won said, quietly. While he was still alive. I was so busy managing everything that I forgot to just sit with him. And now I sit in that house and I go through his boxes and I try to catch up with a man I can't talk to anymore. He paused. I know that's not rational. It's not about rational, she said. No, he agreed. It's not. The bus crossed the bridge. The river opened out below them, enormous, patient, holding the last of the evening light on its surface. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. Why are you still in that house? You've been there for months. You don't have to be. A long pause. I don't know yet what I'm looking for, he said finally. But I know I haven't found it yet. She understood this completely. She had been doing the same thing for 4 years, in a different kind of house, with a different kind of box. I know, she said. Below them, the Han River moved south in the dark. 3 weeks in. They had fallen into something with no name, not friendship exactly, not anything else exactly. Thursday evenings. Occasional weekday texts. She returned the wooden box. She kept the letter inside it. It happened over something small. He mentioned, casually, that he had decided to sell his father's house. She heard herself say, "You can't." He looked at her. "It's not your decision," he said. His voice was careful but direct. "I know that," she said. "I know. She stopped. She didn't have a clean version of what came next. "You've attached something to that house," he said. "I understand that. But it's not your grief to protect." She felt the familiar cold machinery activate, the deflection, the composed retreat, the polished "you're right, I overspoke." She felt herself reaching for it. She didn't take it. "I think I'm afraid," she said instead. "That if that house disappears, this disappears. Whatever this is. And I don't know how to hold on to something that hasn't been named yet." He was quiet for a long moment. She could feel herself having said too much and not being sorry. "I'm not selling it immediately," he said. "I have time. I don't know what I'm doing with it yet." Another pause. "But Yeon-ji, you can't be in this thing, whatever this is, waiting for it to disappear. That's not being here. That's watching from a distance in case you need to leave." She thought about the view from her 9th-floor window. About the way she had always preferred to look at the city rather than move through it. "I know," she said quietly. "Do you want to be here?" he asked. "Not in the house. Here. With me." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I'm just frightened." "I know," he said. "Me too." He stayed until midnight. They had not intended it. They were looking through the remaining boxes. She had offered to help, and he had brought a selection to her apartment, and somewhere in the looking, hours passed. They ate delivery taekguk she ordered at 8 without discussing it. They sat on her floor with photographs and negatives around them and talked in the way that happens when two people have crossed the threshold of formal conversation and landed somewhere more honest. He told her about his mother. She told him about the miscarriage, briefly, factually, the way you first tell something that you've only recently been able to say. He didn't rush to fill the silence after. She found she loved him for that. Not love, she didn't use the word to herself, not yet, but the warmth of the word beginning to form somewhere below language. At 11:45 he looked up and registered the time. "I should go," he said. "Yes," she said. Neither of them moved for a moment. She said, "The orchid. On the table." She nodded at it. "I've been watering it every morning at 7:15 for 2 years. I've never missed a day. I used to think it was discipline. I think now it was, something to prove. That I could keep something alive even when I wasn't sure I was." He looked at the orchid. Then at her. "It's beautiful," he said. "Meaning the orchid and not the orchid." "It is," she said. "Meaning herself and not herself." He stood and gathered his things. At the door, he paused. Yeon-ji SSI, he said. Jae-won SSI, she said. The smallest possible smile, on both sides. The entire weight of everything unsaid, not as absence but as density, as the specific and loaded silence of two people who have decided to wait, because what is worth having is worth arriving at properly. He left. She stood in her apartment. The orchid on the table. The photographs on the floor. The city outside, infinite and indifferent and, tonight, less frightening than usual. She watered the orchid. At 11:52 p.m. The first time she had ever deviated from 7:15. There was one box she hadn't opened yet. She found it on a Sunday while helping him clear the study. Inside, letters. Bound in a rubber band. Personal correspondence, addressed to Han Jae-won in a woman's handwriting. She recognized, immediately from context, that these were from someone he had loved. She didn't read them. She started to. She stopped after 2 lines. She set them down. There's someone here, she said. From the letters. Someone he didn't talk about. Jae-won came across the room and looked at the bundle of letters in her hand. His face moved through something she watched him navigate, surprise, then recognition, then a more complicated emotion she couldn't fully read. I know, he said. She waited. There was someone. Before, after my mother. Years later. They were together for a while. She moved away. He didn't follow. He picked up the bundle of letters carefully. He never talked about her. I only know because I found a photograph of them. Before all of this. He paused. I think he loved her and he was afraid. I think he let her go because it was easier to be alone than to risk losing someone again. The room was very quiet. He was trying to tell you something, she said, carefully. Leaving the boxes for you. I know, Jae-won said. His voice was low. I've been thinking about that. She looked at him. The afternoon light in the study, that particular warm afternoon gold she had first noticed through this window. Don't do what he did, she said. He looked at her. Okay, he said. 2 syllables. An entire decision. March came. The persimmon tree in his father's garden put out the first green. She was there when it happened, a Tuesday evening, and she had started coming on Tuesdays now, and sometimes on Thursdays, and sometimes on unplanned days when one of them texted the other, I'm near Seoul, are you home? These were her favorite texts. They were the opposite of her old life. They were unscheduled. They were allowed to be imprecise. She was sitting in the garden with a book she wasn't reading when she noticed the first bud on the persimmon tree. Jae-won, she said. It was the first time she dropped the SSI. Neither of them mentioned it. He came out. She pointed at the tree. He stood beside her and looked at the bud, green and small and certain against the brown of the branch. She thought about his father photographing the same tree, in winters and springs she had not been there to see. She thought about continuity, how a tree keeps becoming, indifferent to who watches, regardless of who is lost. She thought about the word remains, what it held in 2 directions, what endures, and what is left behind. He would have photographed this, she said. Yes, Jae-won said. Do you have a camera? He went inside and came back with a film camera, old, his father's second. He handed it to her. She hadn't used a film camera in years. She turned it in her hands, feeling the weight of it. Show me, she said. He came to stand just behind her, his hands over hers, adjusting the aperture ring. F4 for this light, he said. Focus on the bud, let the branch go soft. She looked through the viewfinder. The bud sharp. The branch, and beyond it, the house, and the boxes being slowly sorted, and a life that had been one person's and was now in the slow process of becoming something else, all of it soft, held, present without demanding clarity. She pressed the shutter. The sound of the mechanism. Small and decisive. She called her therapist that Thursday, on time, 4 p.m., the regular slot. She sat in her apartment, the wooden box back on her bookshelf where she had placed it, the photographs and the notebook inside it. The letter too. Her therapist asked the question she had been asking for 2 years, in different forms, with different language, patient and persistent. How are you, really? Yeon-ji thought about the question for a long moment. She thought about 22-year-old herself, standing on a Buckshin rooftop, not feeling anything, hoping she would again. She thought about a dead man who saw her when she didn't know she was visible, and wrote 4 words on a page, and meant them. She thought about a man who had learned to notice the things that were trying not to be noticed, and had noticed her, and had been patient about it. She thought about the persimmon bud through the viewfinder, soft focus on everything that wasn't yet clear, and the shutter sound, small and definite. I think, she said, slowly, that I am in the middle of something. Not at the beginning. Not at the end. In the middle, which means it's real. She paused. I think that's the best I've ever been able to say. Her therapist was quiet for a moment. That's the most honest thing you've ever told me, she said. Yeon-ji laughed. It surprised her, a clean, unperformed laugh, the sound of a person who had forgotten what it was like to be surprised by their own responses. I know, she said. In the weeks that followed, she began to carry the camera. Not his father's. Jae-won had given her a small analog camera of her own, a simple, unpretentious thing, the kind a beginning photographer would use. She carried it in her bag. She used it slowly, deliberately, the way she did everything, but the deliberateness was changing. It was less about control. More about attention. She photographed what she noticed. The woman at her usual pojamika who laughed at everything, whose laugh could be heard from across the street. The elderly man who sat on the bench outside her building every morning with a thermos of coffee, watching the street go by with the expression of someone who had decided that the world was sufficient entertainment. The light on the Han River at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, when the mist was still on the water and Seoul had not yet accelerated to its working speed. She photographed Jae-won. He didn't know it at first. She caught him in the moments Han Myung-ji would have recognized, in between, unself-conscious, real. Reading on the floor of his father's study. Looking out the bus window. Standing in the kitchen of the Seoul house stirring instant coffee with the expression of a person thinking about something entirely other than instant coffee. When she showed him the photographs, he was quiet for a long moment. You're good, he said. There was something in his voice that she recognized as moved. I'm learning, she said. That's the same thing, he said. She thought about his father, 40 years of walking Seoul with a camera. She thought about what it meant to leave behind that much looking. She thought about the photographs in the wooden box, all those solitary figures, all those private griefs, all that invisible aloneness now permanently, gently, witnessed. She picked up the camera. She looked at him through the viewfinder. Hold still, she said. He smiled. She pressed the shutter. April. They walked along the Han River at dusk, the first warm evening, the kind that arrives in Seoul like a rumor and then suddenly everywhere at once, everyone outside as if by agreement, the city releasing something it has been holding since November. She carried the camera. He carried 2 cups of convenience store coffee, the bad kind, that somehow tasted right on Han River evenings, that tasted like being young, like cities, like everything ordinary and sustaining about ordinary life. They walked slowly. They didn't say very much. At one point she stopped and turned to look back at the city, the towers lit up against the deepening blue, the river wide and silver in front of them, Seoul in its most particular beauty, the beauty of a place that is impermanent and enormous and entirely indifferent and entirely capable of holding you if you let it. She thought about what she would write, if she wrote his father another letter. She thought she would write, you asked if I would feel something again. The answer is yes. It took a long time. It came from an unexpected direction. It came the way most real things come, not announced, not dramatic, not the way I would have written it if I'd been given the choice. It came the way your photograph found me, from someone who was paying attention. She didn't write it. She kept it in the part of herself that had, in the past year, become less defended. More inhabited. Jae-won appeared beside her. He looked at what she was looking at. "Good light," he said. "Yes," she said. She raised the camera. She didn't photograph the skyline. She photographed his reflection in the river below, his shape, wavering slightly in the current, silver and indefinite, beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they are not trying to be. He didn't know she'd done it. She lowered the camera. She looked at the river. She sipped the bad convenience store coffee. She was 31 years old, in a city she had lived in all her life, on the first warm evening of spring, standing next to a person who had found her by accident and chosen to stay. She felt, not everything. Not yet. She was still in the middle of something, as she had told her therapist. The middle was real. The middle was sufficient. The city moved around them, its indifference no longer cold but spacious, a vast and breathing permission to exist without explanation, to be in progress, to be unfinished and unhurried in here. Here. She was here.